I have the most amazing secret to share with you for the absolute best disappearing 9-patch block. I've been playing around with these blocks for a few weeks now and having a lot of fun coming up with some great designs. But wait until you see this. I had a request to do some diagonal cuts and it is beautiful. I love the way this turned out. I'm Louise from Inspired Quilting by Louise, and I think you are really going to enjoy this. We're going to do some diagonal cuts. We're going to mix a few blocks together, and the result is absolutely fabulous. I'm really excited, can you tell? I want to share this with you, so let's get started, and I'm going to show you how to make these great blocks. My favorite way to make a quilt block is with color. And the first thing I want is contrast, but then I also want a little something that's going to add some design and create perhaps a different element throughout the block when it's finished. What I want you to look at here is the difference between these two. They're both 9 patches. They each have the same center. I do that a lot when I'm doing a scrappy quilt because it sort of creates some continuity and balance throughout the quilt. But what's different about this? Do you notice darks are in the center of the outside rows and the corners are light? Notice this is opposite. The darks are in the corner here and the centers are light. Well, what difference does that make? Well, I don't know. I think maybe we ought to check it out. So the last video I did on the disappearing 9-patch, everything was cut vertically and horizontal. We'll cut this way and this way. We are going to do some diagonal cuts today, and that's going to be incredibly interesting. Now, I want to make sure I hit these points where my blocks join. And hopefully, if you've done your seam nesting, they should line up pretty darn close. And with that being said, we should also be lining up with our corners. So there may be a little give and take here to get these corners as well as your outer corners. And you just do the best you can and make it work. Okay, here we go. You ready? Cutting diagonal is always such a big deal because we worry if we're doing it right or wrong and what it's going to be and what if it doesn't work out. Well, I have some confidence here because I did this on paper and it seemed to work. Now, doing it physically is always another story. I haven't made one of these yet, but I am so excited to share this with you because I think it's going to be a fantastic idea. Okay, again, we've got this here. Now, the reason I'm using blocks with different color layouts as far as the way the darks and lights are laid out is it's going to create more interest when I mix and match. Because I really like taking multiple blocks, cutting them up, putting them together. Okay, I'm missing my corner. There it is. There was a shadow over there and I couldn't quite see it. I like mixing up different blocks because you get such a wonderful, interesting result. Okay, so look at this. Now, one thing that you can do, and it's kind of the, whoops, that one didn't cut all the way. It's kind of something you've probably seen online, is you can take these two and switch them with the other block. Now, because we have the common center, it sort of looks like it was meant to be that way. And this is kind of fun. This is a way that you can sort of turn things around, see what you like, and you sew this block together. First you sew the sides, then you sew this one together in one long seam, and you've got a very interesting block with some half square triangles. When you put these blocks together like this, notice that you're going to get the fan, the windmill. Is that what it's called? I think it's called the windmill. And that's going to really create a wonderful secondary pattern. And that's a great way to do it. But there's one other thing that I want to show you that can also create a whole lot of interest. So let me get our next fabric. Now, if you don't know about low volume fabric, oh my goodness, this is going to be an eye-opener. I love low volume fabric. And you know what? Let's get in up close and personal so you can see some of these fabrics. Low volume fabric is a term that we use in quilting to identify fabrics that are very light, and not necessarily just light like this one is, but that the background is light so that it really stands out. So this could also be a low volume fabric, but it also depends on how you use it. But all these have white or creamy backgrounds, and they have prints. Now, this one has more of a dense print, where this one is very minimal. And by changing it around and mixing them up, you get some wonderful looks. And this is a great way to create a background. So if you're putting your quilt together in some different ways, this is a nice idea to add. And look, I kind of got fun with this one. I got a little wild and crazy, and I thought, okay, I'm going to see how that works because those are bigger prints. But here we go. So we have some basic, what do I want to say? Basic low volume fabrics, and I'm going to cut these in the exact same manner. So I'll go corner to corner, making sure I cut my corners where my blocks come together. And you want to not move that because ideally everything just stays put. So you get a good cut in the other direction. Just like this, from this side to this side. And check my corners, everything's fine. Okay, now, whoops, oh, there's a lot of fabric there. Here's an interesting idea. What can we do with this? Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to see. I just have been anxious to do this because I have just some wonderful ideas about how this is going to turn out. So what if we we'll set one of these aside. We take one of our dark ones and put it here. And then we take another dark one and put it here. Ooh, that's kind of fun. Whoops, put it right side up. That makes a difference. So it really creates a much greater contrast, which would make this very interesting. But now we can take this even one step further. Are you ready for this? We're going to cut everything one more time. And I'm going to line my points. Ordinarily, I would have cut this while I had everything laid out, but I'm going to try and freehand this and see if it works. So I've got that comes to the inch. I want to make sure these are centered. Let's see, 1, 2. Yeah, they pretty much are. So what I'm measuring here is that if I put my point on the corner, that these seams fall at about the same distance. And they're a little bit different, but we're dealing with triangles, and that happens. So I'm going to do this, and it's going to probably take me a few minutes to get some of these cut. So bear with me. There's one. Do that one and this one. I'm going to do the same thing. Line this up on a point, on a straight line. So I can measure, okay, this one is really good. And you want to make sure that one up there is along the line. So get your edge right on that line so you can see it. Get the point on this line and take a look and make sure these are kind of equidistant from the middle. And give it a cut. Oh my goodness, wait till you see this. I am so excited. Okay, ready? So what would happen? Well, we have to do some of the low volume. Oh my goodness, here I thought I was there and I was going to be able to do this. And let's see, this one, look at that. Okay, well, they're all laying out pretty well. Now, obviously, with half square triangles, any kind of triangles or diamonds, when you're cutting on an angle, you sometimes have to compensate with your edges because these corners will overhang when you're doing the various. All right, one more, and then we can start putting our block together. Okay, and I just want to make sure I'm straight, and these are lined up. There we go. It's mostly straight. That one is a little bit wonky, but I think we're going to have some room to put this together when we sew our seams. Okay, so now what we're going to do is take our pieces, the smaller ones, and I want to put two together like this. Let's see. I don't want that one. Here we go. Okay, so do you see where I'm going here? Look at that. And then I would take another one. Let's see. That goes that way. I can't do it. There it is. Okay. I'm going to put it up here so you can see. And there we go. This one here. So we have kind of an interesting pattern developing. What do you think? Oh my goodness. Whoever thought you could turn a disappearing 9-patch into flying geese? Aren't these wonderful? Look at that. What a fantastic quilt this will make. Oh my goodness. I'm going to go cut up my blocks, bring them back, and show you what they look like. And I'll also show you how to sew these because this is something you're going to want to do. I love this, and I hope you're just as excited about it as I am. Oh my goodness. I've not seen a disappearing 9-patch made this way. Oh, how fun is that? The easiest way to cut your 9-patch into the diagonals that we need, the 90-degree triangles, is to cut everything while the block is laid out. And the best way to do that is we're going to first cut vertical, horizontal, then we'll do our corners. Because coming back after the fact and cutting these individually the way I did is very time consuming. It works, but we'll get better, I think, and quicker results this way. So I'm lining my ruler up at 2 1/4. Because remember, this measures 4 1/2 once all the seams are in. And I just always use a little second ruler there to make sure everything is straight. And I've got kind of a iffy one down here. There we go. Okay. That one was a little too far. And that one looks good. Okay. And so we're going to go up and down, back and forth, and then corner to corner on both sides. We do still want to check our corners at this point to make sure we're cutting through the seam. So the beauty of this is if your corners don't exactly match, don't worry about it. No one's going to see it because everything gets cut. And the only corner that will matter is the final one when we put the block together. So this is going to make it so much easier. Now, as I'm staging my blocks to sew them, what I'm doing, oh, look at that. Whoops. Look, it's been months since I changed my blade. And look at, I think I'm finally getting to the point where I need to do it. Have you tried these rotary blades from Fabric Hut? They do last such a long time. And they're on sale. I'll put a link down below. And you can check these out. I'll also put the video up above that you can see where I did some evaluations of these blades, but they do work very, very well. Now you can see I have all my triangles. What I'm going to do is I don't want to use the same two pieces that share a common square in the same block. So I'm going to create two different piles. So I'll start with this one, then I'm going to add the next one in, and then I'll put this one here to make sure those are opposite, and put this one here. And then as I'm piecing my blocks, I'll just take these together and I'll sew them. But you know what? There's another decision to be made, and I'm not sure what I think, because I don't know if, well, I'm going to put that on the bottom just so we don't have the same thing. I don't know if I want my blocks to be this way, or, hold on, let me think about how I did this. It takes me a minute to figure it out. Is it this way, this way? No, hold on. Okay, there it is. Okay, I got this. There's something about turning triangles around that kind of blows my mind. Okay, so look at this. So we have it this way, or, see, how does it see? I just can't see how that goes back. So I have to lay it in the middle. I did it. I can't do it now. Okay. So now you know where my challenge is in quilting, because triangles just blow my mind every time. I can cut them, I can work them, I can draw them, but when I start turning them around, it's a thing. It's a thing. My brain works different, but I think it works differently in a way that makes me be able to do things that perhaps are different from what others do, and that's not a bad thing. So if we do it this way, we've got a square in the middle. If we do it this way, however way that works, I think I took one from a different side, then we're going to get this cross in the middle. Well, if we would have joined it into a full square, but we're not. See, oh my gosh, there are just so many different things you can do with this. But anyway. Okay, we need to stay on track, stay focused, and look at that. Oh my goodness. And so as I go through my piles, each of these should be different than this side. Not that that's critical, but we're going scrappy. But even though it's scrappy, we're creating a really nice balance in the quilt, with the colors being separated and divided from the others with the low volume. But better than that is we are creating a very prominent pattern. And even though this is a low volume, it's a lighter fabric, it works here, but I can come in and find another one that's maybe a little bit darker and create more contrast. So you can see you can play around with these and get some very different looks. Oh my goodness, is this not awesome or what? I am having a lot of fun with this. Okay, so let's go ahead and keep moving on. Let me sew some of these together. I can't wait to see how these turn out. To begin sewing, I have put my piles together so I know how I'm going to sew as I go. And you'll notice I have these lined up so that I don't have any matching seams. Now, I've done it with this one and I've done it with this one. So I have two different sets. So when they go together, I'll get my flying geese. The difference that I want to show you is if I put this one, the low volume here, I get that corner, which is a fun, kind of design element, but quite honestly, it's easier to do it this way because then I don't have to match any seams. So I'm going to go ahead and get this set up to go and start sewing these together. I want to show you what happened so that you can remedy this and know what to expect. See how I have that bump right there? That's right where the seam is. Same thing here. See how that goes around? So what we need to do is pin this so that the fabrics stay together, which didn't seem to be too much trouble. But as we're sewing, we need to make sure we're feeding this and keeping it straight. And so let's do another one. I'll come back and fix that after. With the corner lined up, then I'm going to make sure my points are in good shape. Okay, so I am going to, the other thing that might be easier for you to try is to press the seam open. I generally don't do that, but we'll see how this works. Notice all the different color threads? That's how I use up my threads when I'm doing my scrappy quilts. Let me grab another pin here. I can't quite get it. So I'm going to, let's see. This one here seems to be the bulkiest. And I'm not really pinning it to hold the fabric in place, but just to give me a better grip on sewing this. So let's check this out and see how this works. Get my thread out of the way, put my needle down, and let's go. So I know as I approach this, my needle, my presser foot is going to want to move over, and I just, by holding my finger right here, I'm holding that fabric very close. Whoops. Here we go, my pin's catching on to everything. I'm going to take that pin out, and then I'm just going to hold my finger. Okay, see, that worked much better. So I would recommend definitely pinning it and then holding your finger along that edge. See how nice and straight those came out? All right, now we know the secret. Let me go ahead and start sewing along. And we'll get these blocks finished. I can't wait. It does take a minute to line them up, so this is not going to be a super fast process, but I think it's worth it. Get our pin in there. And it's probably going to be easier to go through and pin them all first. That way when you are, let's see, I'm going to go this way. When you are sewing it, you can just pick them up and go. You don't have to pause in between each to make sure that the pins are there. It just makes it a bit quicker, I think. All right, so, and while you're doing all this, make sure you're keeping your seam allowance consistent. So I'm going to slow down right here. And you know, I find just by holding my finger right there, that keeps the fabric from wanting to slide over. And that makes a big difference. All right, so there we go. So I think after making a few of these, sewing them together, that it is definitely going to get easier. All right, I'm going to see how it goes without a pin. Now that I know that I can just hold it in place, I may not have to pin them. Again, I want to line things up, make sure we're even, that our corners in place, and get my... Well, each time I make one, I'm learning something different. So, a couple things. This is the one where you want to put the pin in, because it's very easy to overlook it. And you want to make sure as you're approaching this seam, you know to hold your finger there. This one is visible because it's right on top, so you don't have as much of an issue. And just line that up. And so we'll sew this one through. And again, I'm just going to hold my finger there to keep everything in place. Slow down if you need to. I'm finding I'm taking a little larger seam allowance than normal. And as long as I'm consistent on all my blocks, when it comes time to trim them, that'll just determine my final size. So find a seam allowance that you're comfortable with. And while it's a 1/4 inch plus or minus so much. And it's not always a huge difference, but when it comes time to trimming, especially when you're dealing with triangles, it does matter a bit. All right, so I'm going to put a pin right here, and I'm just going to stick it in there so I know. All right, so see, it's a good reminder that I have a challenge coming up. And look at that. See, it goes very easily. Once I realized what it was I was doing, there's still just the littlest bit, but I'm not going to worry about that. That's pretty minor. This one's nice and straight. So we just keep sewing these together, and then we'll put together our flying geese, and oh my gosh, I can't wait to see. They're looking gorgeous. I wanted to give you some ideas about piecing your 9-patch blocks. Now, while this isn't necessary per se, I did choose to carry this pink block throughout these. If you watch the original 9-patch, disappearing 9-patch tutorial, I had all my blocks with this in the center, and it just seemed to help create some balance and continuity. Now, with that being said, I want to include lots of different colors in this quilt, but for me to put all the pinks and the purples and the reds and the blues all into one block is challenging. So what I prefer to do is kind of create a colorway in each block. I want to make sure I have some greens. So each of these outer blocks have some level of green, and they work with each other. Like this turquoise is in here. This light green is almost a tealy green is in here. And you see how these greens blend crossing over. This has pink in it, and it carries both that way as well as the green. So I probably put a lot more thought into this than necessary, but for me, it just works out when the quilt is put together, because when these blocks begin lining up, there's a continuity. They blend and they look good. And I have difficulty just randomly putting everything together and then lining them up, because for me, for the way I look at my fabrics and my quilts, I want to see things kind of go together well and look, well, there we go, randomly organized. That's my term. And so I've got a green one. You can see how that works, but I've also done the same in pink. And then I went way out on a ledge and I used a different center. And I'll do that on a few of my blocks just to kind of change things up. And this kind of, had some similar colorways, but getting a little different, but yet they all work together color-wise. This has the blue and teal, and this sort of has some light blues. We get over here to the pinks, and I know it's a long shot, and this is probably a lot more than you want to hear about all these silly little colors matching, but that's the way it is. So if you have some difficulty putting your blocks together or wonder about some different ideas you can try, here you go. See what you think. I want to show you about my confusion with the triangles. I'm sure you all figured this out way before me. Like I said, triangles just don't visually connect with me. So these two go together like this. The only way I'm going to get these two triangles to go together is to put them this way. And this is a totally different way to do your flying geese, is to have this strip and then these 2 points. That creates a very interesting look. But what I'm doing when I'm separating my pieces after I cut them is I put them into piles like this, so that the points with the short corners are all in one pile. And then it's going to be much easier for me to put my pieces together, because what I've done is taken my stacks and put them in the same order. And I'll put this one on the bottom and I'll place this one on the top. And that way when I go to put them together, they're all right where they need to be. unless I decide to take it in another direction and flip it around the other way. So I haven't quite decided, but I am going to go ahead and get these together. I just wanted to show this to you in case you had the same confusion I did. But it's not difficult. And again, you sit and you play with it and you know, okay, this isn't going to go together the way I want. So let me grab another piece. And it worked out beautifully. As much as I got totally excited and enthralled with my flying geese, or what I'm calling in flying color, I do want to show you a couple other different layouts that can be a lot of fun with this block. And essentially, the simple way, because you know I need to do simple with triangles, it works a whole lot better for me, is to just switch them around like this. And now you have half square triangles in each corner, and you have these blocks that kind of create another square in the middle. And it's just kind of an interesting look, but there's another way that I think is even better. And what we want to do is create a plus sign in the middle, like this. And then we want one to go, let's see, I want one of each color. I have this one. I don't have this one in. Okay, so this one and this one. Okay, y'all, help me do this. So I want this to come down this way. And so I have to get the opposite. Okay, whew, there it is. I have to remember to use the opposites because that's what confuses me. Here we go. Look at that. How fun is that? Get all these little pinwheels going. And then you just take these pieces, and we don't want to put them together with the same, and do something like this. Now, you're going to have matching corners, and you have to decide if you want to fuss with that. But then what you can do is if you use 2 blocks, come in with another set and just put these around like that. So you've got your half square triangles, but these aren't matching. Now, alternatively, you can make that triangle go to the other side. And let's see, where's another one of those? Right here. And see how that looks. So you've got your plus sign and no matching seams right here. So that makes it even easier. You don't exactly get a half square triangle, but that's okay. This is going to create a lot of fun in your quilt. And you know what? This, oh, look at that pattern coming out. I like that. Ooh, that'll be pretty. So there we are, more options. Now you have to make a decision which one you want to make. With all your cut pieces sewn together into half square triangles with your 1/4 inch seam, we're going to come back and cut between because we did the chain stitching. But what I want to show you is when I cut mine between the chain stitching, I will also trim a little bit of that corner off, because as we are sewing, we are going to then come back and trim, and we're going to trim a lot of these corners off, but not all of them, because some of them will fall in seams. But this way, it just saves a little bit of time later on, and when I'm sitting at my machine, I can do this so quickly, and I just come in, and you can see what I'm doing is just cutting right to where it's sewn. And I kind of, instead of going straight, I kind of cut it at a little bit of an angle. And then that way, when I open my block, and I'll show you, there are some situations here where we're going to sew our seam open. But if we do it open, it fits nice. We don't have extra tails sticking out. And then if we go to one side or the other, it also fits well. So that's just a quick way to do a little pre-trimming before you get started. Now, once all the trimming is done, we're going to press everything. And just lay your piece on the ironing board like this with the dark side up, and you'll lift this. I always preset, or what do I want to say, pre-press to set the seam. And what that just does is it helps the threads sort of sink into the fabric, and it just makes a nice tight seam. And then I'll fold this up. I'll actually roll it and just press it with my iron. Now remember, this is a bias seam, so you don't necessarily want to go at an angle. You want to go in line with the grain of the fabric. So come in and press up this way, then bring your iron that way. So you come in and then over. If you go like this, you're going to end up with a bow, and this seam will curve on you, because if you see, if I pull that, you see how it's going to stretch, and we don't want that to happen. Now, the fun about this is we get to put it together, but there is one more step, because we want to trim our blocks. And there are a couple ways to do it. So we start with a 14-inch 9-patch with our 5-inch squares. We cut it into quarters, and each of our squares, before we cut them in half, when they're like this, is 7 inches. Now, when we come in and we join two together, we cut it in half and sew them, then it's going to measure anywhere from 6.5 to 6 5/8. It depends on your seam allowance. So the best thing to do is go through and measure a few just to see where yours are falling size-wise. And you want to choose whatever's the smallest. If you have 50 squares, check 6 or 8 of them, and just to get a cross-section and take them from different places in the pile. Because when you're cutting these into quarters, the initial 9-patch into 4 blocks, sometimes it can be a little bit skewed. Even though we, work towards accuracy, when you have a block that is that big, you can get a little bit of a twist in your ruler, and it can change things. And you know how with triangles that happens easily. So I'm finding that most of mine are measuring, 2, 4, 6, just over 6.5. So mine are probably in the 6 5/8 range. And what I want to show you, yeah, that's pretty constant here. And I'm a bit surprised, I must say, because some of these seemed kind of fussy going together, like one was smaller than the other, but it looks like it all worked out. Now, it's not uncommon to get edges like this, where you're sewing and one block is smaller than the other. So if I measure this one right here, 3, 6, and see, that's almost right at 6.5. So even though I have all these at 6 5/8, I'm probably going to end up cutting at 6.5. It's only 1/8 of an inch difference, but it's going to make things a lot easier in the long run. Let me show you how to cut your blocks, how to trim your edges to the size that you want. There are a couple ways to do it. My personal favorite is using a square ruler. This ruler is 6.5 inches. So that works out really well, because then I can sort of center it and I get exactly what I want. Really, really important, though, is that 45-degree angle. When you're cutting and trimming a block, you want to make sure that you're cutting it square with that angle. Otherwise, your corners are not going to line up. So if I'm going to cut this at 6.5 inches, I want to put the line right on my diagonal seam, and then I will cut each side. Now, this is not easy to do because you have to keep turning it around. Now, there is a way, let's see, this corner. If I can get this corner here, and this is a long ruler, so it takes a little finagling to get it where I want. But if I put this right in the corner and See, there's 6 inches. Oh, that's 6.5. Yep. Okay, so I line up here. I'm on my line. I make sure I have enough room all the way around, and then I can cut this. And this is all 6.5 inches. But see, I have to keep turning it around, and that's a lot of work, especially when you have a long ruler like this. So for me, that's why I like square rulers. I just wanted to show you that because you can do it this way, but it's going to take a bit more time, and you'll probably be double doing some of the work that you've already done. The only ruler I have that's really going to work best is my large 12.5, and that's not a problem. It'll work fine. It's just that it's larger to work with, and here, let's get this here. And it may be a little cumbersome at first until you get used to it, but if it's what you have, it works perfectly. The one thing that I did, and you'll notice this 45-degree line, I took a piece of tape, and on the tape, I drew a red line exactly on my 45. So when I'm laying this on fabric, I can see that, and it makes it so much easier. These lines, see the black line? You get it in there, and it sort of disappears a little bit, but not that red one. It's right there, and I can't miss it. So I'm going to set this up at 6.5 inches. And so I'm going to come to 6.5 inches here, and I'm going to come to 6.5 inches here. Now, if everything goes well, this line should be right on the seam, and it looks pretty darn awesome. So all I would have to do, since I'm measuring against this seam over this edge, I know that that's going to be nice and square, and then all I have to do is come in and trim this. And then I have my beautiful 6.5-inch square, and it's going to go together well. But this is the reason why I trim those little corners when I do my chain stitching, because I just don't like dealing with them. And they make the seams too bulky. If you leave that in there and you're sewing, get all these threads, and you're sewing those in the seam, you're going to have big lumps and bumps, and it gets really difficult to press those out. So that's the trimming. Now that they're trimmed, we get to sew them together. And I want to show you some ideas I had. The first thing that I did, whoops, let's see. Not all these have been trimmed, but that's okay. You'll get the idea of what we're going to do here. So I really liked this one, but there's a seam. And I thought, no, I don't want to be dealing with matching seams. So here's what I did instead. I brought in another one. So basically this one would have been cut in the opposite direction. So these, if you'll notice, the points are to the outside. This one, we have a point to the outside and a point to the top. No seams to match. You match this corner, you sew, and it's finished. So here are 4 squares, and what we do is we're going to sew these together along this seam and here, but we have to match this crossover seam in each of them, and that makes a little extra work actually in order to align those, and there's a lot of seam allowance going on in there with everything folded over. The big thing is that when you sew these two together, you want to make sure, let me find a piece here that I can show you. We want these two to go together so that the seams align. We want that diagonal seam to align right along here so that when we sew it, we've got a perfect alignment. And we sew it, and then we open it, and we have a great point. That's our goal. And that's what we want to do here and here. But if we could not have to worry about this seam, that would be a bit easier. So let me show you. I have a couple blocks that are done this way. And you see you have that straight piece across. I was able to do it and match the seam. That all worked out okay. And we have our corners, our points. So our point is within, underneath the seam, so it's not being cut off. We don't have any nubbed points on there, which is perfect. And so here's one block, and here's another one. Aren't they pretty? And despite the background having a lot going on, that white background of the prints really makes it recede. And even though we have all that color, it's just, sort of white noise, I guess is a good way to call it. But it looks wonderful, and I love it. And because these are very deep colors, there's a strong, how do I want to say that? The hue is much darker in these. The color is more intense, as opposed to these are more like pastels, which is what, essentially a low volume is. And it looks great. But again, we've got these seams. Check out this next one. Now, by turning these and putting one corner here and one corner here, see those points? So on this one, the points went to the outside, and then the two met up here in the middle. This one, the points, we have one to the outside and one to the top. But just look at that. I love this. And this is awesome too. I could see where you could make a block and put these together like this and have a pair here and a pair there. Oh my goodness. And you know what? I'm going to have to get this camera set so I can show this to you, because this is the way I want to make my quilt. I love this. So give me just a minute. We'll get a little more visibility here and we'll see how beautiful this looks. Are these not the most awesome flying geese? These are scrappy flying geese that I absolutely love. And all this from a 9-patch, a disappearing 9-patch at that. So if you have 9 patches already sewn and you've already cut them into your pieces like this, then you can just start cutting them diagonally and create this. But you know what would be even easier? Use a solid background, or I don't mean a solid, use a single piece fabric for your background. Cut it 7, I think this is 7 inches, right? Yeah. Cut it 7 inches, put it on here, draw a line, sew on each side of the line, and then you have 2. Oh my goodness, how perfect is that? So this can be really quick. It can be a little more intricate like this is. We definitely took the long way around, but it's so worth it. This is beautiful. I absolutely adore this. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you were here to share this with me today. I have had such fun making this, and there will be a quilt, and I think I need to make a pattern because this is something I really want to share and make sure folks know how to do. Thank you again. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. You have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.